Jennie adjusted the red scarf around her neck as she pushed open the heavy glass door of the department store. The icy December air mixed with the frenzy of Christmas shopping. Children screamed for toys, adults rummaged through shelves, and an exhausted Santa Claus listened to the rushed wishes of kids queued with distracted mothers glued to their phones. For Jennie, the chaos held no magic, it only reminded her of how stagnant her life had become. A marketing assistant at a company where her efforts went unnoticed, she dealt with demanding clients and forced smiles while watching her friends flaunt luxurious vacations and perfect relationships. Dodging two teenagers running past her, she nearly toppled a display of Christmas socks and sighed, "What a great start to the day." Little did she know, this day would change her life. By the end of the workday, her feet throbbed, and her mental to-do list stretched all the way to next Christmas. She decided she needed a strong coffee, maybe sweeter than it should be. The corner cafe was packed, but Jennie ignored the crowd, heading straight to the counter. As she placed her order, she noticed the twinkling Christmas lights outside the window, bringing a bitter sense of irony. "Order for Mr. Thompson," the barista called enthusiastically. Without thinking, Jennie grabbed the steaming cup, assuming it was hers, and thanked the barista in haste. As she turned, she collided with a tall man, impeccably dressed in a suit. His raised eyebrow and smooth British accent broke the tension. "I believe that's my coffee." His brown eyes sparkled with a hint of cynicism. Jennie flushed immediately, handing back the cup while stumbling over apologies. He accepted it with a half-smile that irritated and charmed her in equal measure. Feeling his curious gaze linger on her, Jennie quickly turned away and returned to her spot. Flustered and unable to focus, the coffee she ordered became just another prop in what promised to be a long and dull day. Back at work, whispers filled the office. "The new boss has arrived." Ignoring the buzz, Jennie buried herself in emails until the door to the marketing department swung open. To her surprise, it was the man from the cafe. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Richard Thompson, your new department director." Jennie felt the blood drain from her face as he locked eyes with her, clearly savoring the irony. That evening, Jennie went to Bella's house for their traditional gathering. Surrounded by flawlessly dressed friends and a Christmas tree straight out of a magazine cover, she listened as Bella triumphantly announced she'd be spending New Year's in Switzerland with her fiancé. When Carolina, the ever-curious friend, asked, "What about you, Jennie? Any news?" the pressure led Jennie to make an impulsive decision. "Actually, I'll be spending Christmas with my new boyfriend." The room fell silent, followed by a storm of questions and intrigued looks. Jennie tried to keep her composure but realized she needed to add more details. Before she could stop herself, the words spilled out, "Richard Thompson." Her friend's eyes widened, and Bella smirked. "Richard Thompson? Your new boss? Seriously, Jennie? How did that happen?" Carolina asked, clearly intrigued. Jennie laughed nervously, trying to stay in control, but she knew she had dug herself into a hole. Taking a deep breath, she answered casually, "Well, it's a bit of an unusual story. It all started when we met at a cafe. I accidentally took his coffee, and it was pretty awkward. But somehow, that moment brought us closer. After that, we kept bumping into each other, first by chance and then, well, he asked me out." "Wow, what a story. How long have you been together?" Bella asked, clearly invested. Jennie hesitated before replying, "It's still pretty new. Honestly, I was trying to keep it a secret at first, but I guess I'm not very good at hiding things," she added with a nervous smile, trying to sound convincing. Her friends exchanged looks of surprise and excitement while Jennie's heart raced. The story she'd fabricated now had a life of its own, and she knew the next step would be even more challenging. The following days were chaotic. Her friends, thrilled, insisted on organizing a Christmas Eve dinner to meet her boyfriend. The day after their dinner plans were made, Jennie found herself torn between nervousness and despair. After observing Richard in the office for just a few days, she had pieced together his life. He was single, entirely focused on work, perhaps the very reason her wild idea to invent this story had come to life. But now, with everything spiraling out of control, Jennie knew she had to act fast, despite her embarrassment and fear of his reaction. Summoning all her courage, she decided to go to Richard's office and tell him everything. Jennie stood before the door, taking a deep breath before knocking lightly. "Come in," said a firm, authoritative voice. She entered hesitantly, finding Richard seated behind an impeccably organized desk. Despite being young for a managerial position, he exuded confidence and was undeniably attractive. His intense brown eyes and the subtle furrow in his brow drew admiration from Jennie, despite herself. She fought to maintain her composure. "Mr. Thompson, I need to speak with you about something important," she began, her voice slightly shaky. He looked up from his computer, leaning forward slightly. "Jennie, please, no formalities. Call me Richard." "And of course I'm listening," he replied with an intriguing smile. Jennie felt the words catch in her throat, but forced herself to continue. "Mr. Thompson, I need to confess something," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. Richard, visibly intrigued, raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms, adopting an attentive posture. "I'm listening. Go ahead," he encouraged in a calm tone. Taking a deep breath, Jennie gathered her courage. "Yesterday, I was at a dinner with some friends, and at some point, I said something without thinking. I acted impulsively, and now they believe you're my boyfriend. I made it up, and now the situation is completely out of control. I know it was wrong, but I was under pressure. I never meant to cause trouble for you," she admitted, her voice trembling as she glanced up briefly to meet his gaze. For a moment, the silence in the room was deafening. Richard leaned slightly forward, his brown eyes fixed on her, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "So you cast me as the imaginary boyfriend to impress your friends?" His voice was soft but laced with playful provocation. Jennie nodded slowly, her face burning with embarrassment. Richard leaned back in his chair, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I have to admit, that's quite the story. And I'll say this, you've got courage to come here and own up to it." "I'm not upset, Jennie. In fact, I'm curious to see how you plan to handle this," he said, his arms crossed again but now with a glimmer of humor in his eyes. Jennie, surprised by his reaction, tried to form a response. I was thinking of just clearing things up with them. I didn't want to involve you any further. Maybe we can just put an end to this discreetly," she suggested, though her uncertainty was evident. Richard stood up, walking toward her, stopping just a few steps away. "Or," he said, "we could turn this into something convincing for a while. Who knows? It might even be interesting. After all, I'm already involved." He smiled provocatively. Jennie blinked, confused. "Are you suggesting we continue with the story?" she asked hesitantly. Richard shrugged. "It could be fun, as long as you're willing to play by the rules. What do you say?" Jennie took a deep breath, feeling both challenged and relieved by his easygoing approach. "If you're really okay with it, then I accept." "Let's try," she replied, still in disbelief. Richard smiled, clearly pleased. "Great. So Jennie, we have an agreement. Let's see where this takes us," he said, gesturing toward the door. Jennie left the office with a mix of relief and anxiety, realizing she had just stepped into an unexpected and challenging game. When Christmas Eve arrived, the dinner was set against a backdrop of twinkling lights and elegant decorations. Richard charmed Jennie's friends effortlessly, playing the role of the perfect boyfriend with natural ease. When he placed an arm around her waist, Jennie felt a shiver run down her spine, realizing that this fake relationship was beginning to affect her more deeply than it should. The evening ended flawlessly, leaving everyone convinced they were a genuine, loving couple celebrating Christmas together. That night, something began to shift in Jennie. As she headed home, her mind replayed moments spent with Richard. She tried to push the thoughts away, thinking, "This is crazy. I'm reading too much into this. It's just an agreement, something we arranged." But the feelings she had been trying to suppress slowly began to surface. Richard's kindness, the light-hearted tone of his words, and the spark in his eyes during simple conversations made Jennie realize her emotions were changing. Richard, on the other hand, began noticing something different too. In the days that followed, what had started as just an agreement began to feel more real. He found himself watching Jennie when she was distracted or laughing at something simple. The way she tilted her head slightly when hearing something interesting or her soft laughter left an impression on his mind. The unexpected moments they shared deepened their connection. One time, Jennie dropped some papers, and as Richard helped her pick them up, their hands briefly touched. It was a fleeting moment, but enough for them both to feel something different. Richard started to realize that Jennie wasn't just part of an improvised plan, she was an admirable and captivating woman. As weeks passed, their time together brought genuine laughter, deeper conversations, and lingering gazes that lasted a second too long. What had begun as a shared lie now seemed to take on a life of its own in their hearts. Jennie, though reluctant to admit it, knew Richard was more than just an attractive boss. He was someone who made her feel alive in a way she hadn't in a long time. One evening, on a terrace illuminated by Christmas lights, Richard complimented her sincerely. "You look beautiful." Jennie blushed, but before she could respond, he leaned in and kissed her. It was a tender, hesitant kiss, but it was charged with emotion. Jennie's heart raced as she realized that moment wasn't part of the charade. Reality, however, soon caught up with them. The romantic atmosphere that had developed between them, what had once been just an agreement, became more evident with each passing day. Jennie found herself thinking about Richard often, admiring his kindness and charisma, while Richard realized his attraction to Jennie was no longer part of the game. But no lie lasts forever. One afternoon at the office, during a private conversation between the two, a coworker named Clara, known for her jealousy toward Jennie, overheard fragments of their discussion. Clara, who disliked Jennie, saw this as the perfect opportunity to stir up trouble. Without hesitation, she spread the rumor throughout the company that Jennie and Richard's relationship was a sham. The next morning, when Jennie arrived at work, she noticed curious glances and hushed whispers everywhere. The growing discomfort confused her until a colleague approached her and quietly said, "Jennie, people are saying your relationship with Richard is fake." The shock paralyzed her. How had this information leaked? Without a second thought, Jennie rushed to Richard's office. He had just learned about the rumors himself and was waiting for her with the same concern. "Richard, I don't know what happened, but they know." "Someone found out everything," Jennie said, her voice trembling with anxiety. Richard took a deep breath, clearly trying to organize his thoughts. "Jennie, this is getting out of hand. Maybe it's best if we end this agreement now before it causes more damage for either of us," he suggested, his tone calm but resolute. Jennie felt a pang in her chest. She knew he was right, but the thought of ending everything left her devastated. They decided to step back and avoid contact, but deep down, both knew they had made an incredibly difficult decision. It was a choice driven by professionalism, yet their hearts were already connected in ways they could no longer deny. Jennie tried to move on with her life, throwing herself into work and convincing herself that Richard was just part of a closed chapter. But every time she sat alone or closed her eyes, memories of his smile or the touch of his hand resurfaced. She couldn't forget the moments they had shared, especially that Christmas dinner where everything felt so right. Meanwhile, Richard struggled with the separation too. He vividly remembered the way Jennie had looked at him that night, as if they were the only two people in the world. The feeling only grew stronger, even in her absence. Over time, love prevailed. Richard realized he could no longer fight what he felt. One day, while everyone at the office was busy with their tasks, he stood up, gathered the courage he needed, and walked over to Jennie's desk. In front of all their colleagues, he said, "Jennie, I know I should have said this sooner, but I need everyone to hear what I'm about to say. What started between us as a lie has become the most genuine thing I've ever felt. I've tried to stay away, tried to ignore it, but it's impossible. You mean so much to me, more than any rule or convention. I admire you for the incredible woman you are, for your strength and kindness. And if you're still willing to take a chance, I want to try for real with you. Jennie, will you be my girlfriend for real, right here and now?" Jennie, caught off guard, was speechless for a moment. The entire office froze to watch the scene, but to her, it felt like only the two of them existed. Her eyes filled with tears, and she finally smiled, saying, "Yes, Richard. I accept." The office erupted in applause, but Jennie and Richard barely noticed. He stepped closer and hugged her, finally letting go of the burden of their lie. From that moment on, they were free to live their love without pretense. Their relationship blossomed, now free from secrets or performances. They continued to grow together, building a love grounded in the truth and the connection that had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. What began as an improvised agreement turned into an authentic love story, proving that honesty and true love always prevail. Time passed, and Jennie and Richard became more than just a couple. They supported each other's dreams and vulnerabilities, transforming what had been a farce into a real love story. Jennie let go of the insecurities that had led her to the initial lie, while Richard revealed a more human side of himself. In the end, what started at Christmas as a lie to impress friends became the foundation of a love that would unite Jennie and Richard for all the Christmases to come. What seemed improbable bloomed into a genuine and profound love story, showing that truth, no matter how difficult, is the most beautiful path when accompanied by courage and sincere hearts. If Jennie and Richard's story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep bringing you incredible stories like this one. share it with someone special, and comment below what you thought of this breathtaking romance. And don't go anywhere, click on the next video appearing on your screen for more exciting twists and heartwarming tales.